Everyone. Very good, Erev Shabbat. When Yosef passed away in Mitzrayim, so the Torah, what he said to the Jewish people, to his children, grandchildren, descendants, Yosef saw many generations. The Torah records it, Gam Shileshim, Gam Rivaim. So he told them that Elokim Bokod Yifkod Eschem, the Lord will surely remember, redeem you. And when they do, he'll take my bones from Egypt and rebury them in the land of Israel. The Meforshim say that one of the things that he told them was that the Redeemer, when he came, would say, Elokim Pokod Yifkod Eschem. The Lord will redeem you. So that was like the code. Now we all know that a code that's known by thousands of people is not much of a code. So what is meant here? That he's going to say, and Moshe said it. How does that become something of substance? So if we look at the whole story as the Torah portrays it for us, there are three stages in this redemptive process. The first stage, which is perhaps the most difficult, is that Moshe himself has to believe. Now, Moshe is certainly a believer. He wouldn't be Moshe Rabbeinu otherwise. But we see in the Chumash that Moshe wavers. First, he doesn't want the job. It's very hard to be successful in a job or a profession that you yourself don't believe in. You don't believe that you can do it. It's very hard to say you're going to do it. So there's always this line of demarcation between self-confidence and arrogance. Self-confidence is, it's a hard job, but I think I can do it. Arrogance is, it's nothing, I can do that. I remember in the yeshiva, when I went to the yeshiva a long time ago, so they, all through Chumash Bereshis and Shmos, they had the Bocharim on Shabbos deliver the Dvar Torah in front of the Rabbeim, who sat in the Mizrach wall, the imposing Talmidei Chachamim, and the 16, 17-year-olds had to get up and speak. So I remember one of the Rabbeim, he wanted to instill confidence in a young man that apparently was lacking some. So he said, well, just, do your best and it'll be fine. He said, Rebbe, well, what if they're listening? So that's the problem. What if they're listening? So in the vacuum, Moshe certainly believes. He has no doubts. But when he comes to face the Jewish people, and he comes to see what his audience looks like, so then he is shaken. He will say that in the Parsha, in last week's Parsha, who are the Jewish people to be redeemed? Look at them. Probably gave him the Friday edition of Haaretz to read. So why should he do it? So Moshe has to come to believe. Moshe has to think that it's going to be something. And one could say, in general, that the entire Parsha of Shmos and Vayera, the Parshas, is the education of Moshe Rabbeinu. Because until Moshe is aware, they're not going to be aware. That's why it says later, Vayaminu B'Hashem Moshe Avdo. So Vayaminu B'Hashem is the general thing, right? We all have Emunah on Hashem. It's just, I don't know how to translate Emunah B'Hashem into everyday life. But they not only had Emunah on Hashem, they had Emunah in Moshe. And that's the idea throughout Jewish history of having faith in leadership, in Talmidei Chachamim, in the people who represent Torah. And the faith is that they mean your best interest. Which is something that oftentimes is rare in leadership. And that's why the Torah portrays for us that Moshe needs miracles to be induced. He needs the staff to turn into snakes. He needs the water to turn into blood. All sorts of things have to happen until Moshe is convinced that this is his life's mission and that he has to fulfill it, that it's inescapable. So the first level is Moshe Rabbeinu himself. The second level is the Jewish people. Jewish people are by nature skeptics. Why should they believe him? So what does he say? He says, Elakim Pokot, Yifkod Eschem. Everybody says that. Everybody knows that. That doesn't prove anything. There are various midrashim, whether or not there were, I would say euphemistically speaking, false messiahs in Egypt. The Medrash says that the entire tribe of Ephraim tried to leave early. Were destroyed in the desert. So why should they believe Moshe? Not only that, why should they believe that somehow they'll be redeemed? So that's a test. It's a test of the consciousness of the Jewish people. I think one of the most remarkable things in our time, that's something that is not emphasized sufficiently. What are we doing here in Eretz Yisrael? How do we get back there? How do we get 8 million Jews here? How do we go through wars and difficulties, build up a first world state? How did this happen? Because the Jewish people believed that it could happen, that it would happen. And they believed that even though it took 1,800 years to happen, one would give up after 1,800 years. My Rebbe in the yeshiva used to say that the Jewish belief in Eretz Yisrael, he always spoke to us in our language. He says, like you believe in the Chicago Cubs. They never win, but you believe in them. They're going to win. So over 1,800 years, we never won. Most people in the world, after 1,800 years, figure it out. You're never going to win. It's impossible to put all the pieces together. Jewish people believed. Whether you're a Zionist or a non-Zionist or an anti-Zionist, the facts stare you in the face. Fact is that it happened. And it happened because Jews believed that it would happen. They had no doubt. I remember 1946 or 7. And the Ponevezher Rov came to Chicago to raise money for the Yevada Yeshiva and for the refugees. The first time I ever saw him. And I was barely bar mitzvah. I don't even know if I was bar mitzvah. And I was in the audience when he spoke. He spoke with such loving kindness and such a personality. But I remember one thing that he said. It was at a time when the Lehi here, the British lovingly called the Stern Gang, was fighting for Jewish independence from the British mandate. And so they arrested quite a number of Jews. And not only that, they executed quite a number of Jews. So the Rav said as follows. The Rav said, I remember it like today. I don't remember yesterday, but like today. He said there are 6 Jews that are sitting in jail in Jerusalem. And they're sitting in jail because they want to drive the British out of Eretz Yisrael. And he said, I am firmly convinced that they will drive the British out of Eretz Yisrael. He said, if I had 6 Jews that were as devoted to build a Torah state, we could do it. But he said, I don't have them. It made an enormous impression upon me. Because it was not just a rhetorical statement from a great man. It's a statement, a fact. So therefore, in the Torah it says, "Vayaminu b'Hashem u'b'Moshe avdo." The Jewish people have to believe. They have to think that somehow it's going to happen. And that's the miracle is that after 1,800 years, they believed it was going to happen. How it's going to happen, through whom it's going to happen, should it happen this way, should it happen another way, all of that is immaterial. So this week, a Jewish young woman that's being nominated by the President of the United States to an important position. And she was being queried by members of the Senate, the committee that passes on her nomination. One of the senators asked her, by the way, the Jewish senators, that's a different speech. One of the senators asked her, he said, you know, in my office, I asked you whether you believe that the Jewish people have a biblical right to the West Bank of Palestine. And he said, you answered yes. He said, I was amazed by that. So I was also amazed. I was amazed that she would have answered yes. But the truth of the matter is that if she doesn't believe, we don't believe, so then the whole thing's an exercise in futility. So the first step is Moshe. The second step is the Jewish people, Klal Yisrael. And we'll see later in Parshas B'Shalach, it says, "V'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael meretz Mitzrayim." Not everybody went out. Not everybody believed. And we'll see that throughout the sojourn in the desert, there's a constant undercurrent that if we have problems, let's go home back to Egypt. Don't sell your home in San Diego yet. But so that's the great challenge that Moshe faces, and he faces it in his entire career. How to convince the recalcitrant people that they are somehow Zgula Mikol Ha'amim. We have to. There's no education for that. That's because that deals with your essence. Who are you? My Rabbi always used to say that if Moshe Rabbeinu came down today, would he recognize you and would you recognize him? Throughout Jewish history, we felt that he would recognize us and we would recognize him. But if that bond is broken, so then there's very little that can be accomplished. That's really the story of what goes on in front of us. Why so many Jews are just completely off the radar. No connection to Moshe. And finally, Moshe has to convince Paro. Moshe says the famous Kal V'chomer logical matter in this week's Parsha. Ein b'nei Yisrael lo shomu elai. I can't get the Jewish people to believe in me. Ve'ech yishmeini Paro, then how can I expect that Paro? So it's the Netziv from Volozhin in the Hamik Dover says you'll find in the Talmud that there are many methods to deduce Torah Shabbal Peh from Torah Shebikzav. We say the Brisa, the Yud Gimel Miras Shator Nidreshet Bohem, 13 logical ways to be able to understand this. One of them is a Kal V'chomer. It's this kind of logic. If the little thing can't be accomplished, then I certainly can't accomplish the greater thing. So the Netziv points out that a Kal V'chomer is the weakest of all of the 13 methods. Because you see in the Talmud, in the Talmud very often that they will use a Kal V'chomer to try to come to a principle, and they'll ask questions on it. And sometimes they'll discard the Kal V'chomer, move on to another thing. So for instance, there's a Gzeirah Shovah. Gzeirah Shovah is you have the same word in two different places. So what it means in one place can be deduced to mean in this place as well. So there are guardrails to that the Gzeirah Shovah has to have tradition with it. But once we establish there's a Gzeirah Shovah, there's no questions that can knock it off, that can say it's not valid. A Kal V'chomer is never ironclad. A smarter person will come along and point out the fallacy. So the Netziv says that the Gemara deduced that from this story in the Parsha. Moshe Rabbeinu makes a Kal V'chomer. Rashi says this is one of the places where the Torah uses a Kal V'chomer specifically. And you see that Moshe is wrong. Moshe said Paro won't listen. At the end is that Paro does listen. So the lesson behind that is that in dealing with the world and with Paro, it's not that logic is not important. Logic is always important. We are not built upon foolishness. We're not built upon imaginary things. However, logic is not the only criteria. Because if it would be the only criteria, the world would look far different than it does, for the better or for the worse. But there are always other factors that buffet logic, that make it less logical. unexpected things that happen, unpredictable things that happen. So the Nesiv effect says that you can't make a Kal Vachomer because there are unexpected things that happen. Can't build it on that alone. And that is what gives Moshe the character and strength to pursue this mission till the end. He doesn't quit going to Paro because there's a Kal Vachomer against it. When the people see how Moshe behaves, so they hear in his inflection that he tells them, Elokim Pakod Yifkod Eschem, that's different than anyone else that used the code. They hear in him the sincerity of the mission, the revelation at the burning bush, the decades of preparation that Moshe had in order to be able to accomplish his mission. They hear all of that in him. And then they believe it. They're willing to believe it. But without all of those accoutrements, it's only words. Everybody knows the words. Everybody knows the mantra. Not going to convince anybody. So the Parsha develops for us these ideas of how the Jewish people became the Jewish people. And how Moshe became Moshe. And the Jewish people here acquire the attribute of patience. They're in Mitzrayim now 210 years. So after 210 years, one would think the promise would wear thin. And these are lessons for our time too. For all the situations that we find ourselves in. So each person has to strengthen one's self. Each person is Moshe today. And in our own personal strength, there's a national strength. The national strength brings us to have power over unexpected developments and even over a hostile world. So thank you for coming and have a Shabbat Shalom and be well.